Generally, it's very difficult to move up in Hollywood. Originally, I started as a director in Holland. But coming here, I had to start all over again, you know, and so the best way to start was as a cinematographer. But they kept asking me to do more movies. I said, listen, I want to go back to how I started my career. And I found that script Speed. And once the movie was successful, then it's a little easier. And then, of course, that's when I saw the script of Twister. I thought, wow, this is so completely up my alley.
Tighten your seatbelt.
At the time, you know, that movie had so many effects in it, and nobody had ever done those effects. So the whole idea was, if we could prove to the studio that we could make those effects and make them look real, not just like a little wind machine, and then hopefully it looks like a Twisted. So we did a test with ILM. It took a long time, and you know, a lot of different efforts.
This one for PH-13, huh? The camera be down there.
They had to actually basically invent new software because nothing existed.
The front of the reel, please.
I was working with Dennis Muren on Casper, another Amblin production, and Steven Spielberg had approached Dennis Muren to do a test for Twister, which Steven always likes to do. We did one with Habib Zagapur, a guru at Industrial Light and Magic, who also became sort of my right-hand guy on Twister.
We did the test and showed it to the studio, and they loved it.
It was so dynamic that people wanted to use it for the trailer and to market the movie.
The script wasn't even quite finished yet, but when they saw the shot, we have to do that, and we have to do it now. Casting for this movie, I thought, was going to be the most important thing that I had to do, because I felt like if this movie is not cast right, audiences are not going to believe it. I really was very convinced that it couldn't be big stars. I wanted to find actors that are really good and that looked like they could be a student, could be a scientist, could be like an obsessed, you know, student, so that you would get a group, an ensemble that is interesting to look at, you know. They're hip, they're a little crazy, because you have to be crazy.
We know where Jonas is?
Yeah, he's still in Mills. It's more than 30 miles from it.
Thanks, Meg. He's moving. Can we beat him?
I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, so that's part of Tornado Alley. I remember line storms, and Jan de Bont and I bonded on the film. My first meeting with Jan was in the morning, and I came in, my hair was short. His biggest concern, would my hair grow out in time? Because Bill, I want you have to have the hair for the wind to blow. You know, like the short hair, it's no good for me. Okay, Jan, I go, my hair grows real fast. He really wanted to know if I was up for the physical punishment of this movie.
Bill Paxton, you know, I knew the physical difficulties you would run into in making the movie. So I needed an actor, you know, who was not a whiner. And once you're willing to deal with that, it's fantastic.
Okay, guys, let's go get it.
I needed a very strong female talent, somebody who really you also could believe she's a scientist, she's a strong individual. I mean, she's pushy, she still has a heart, has a sense of humor, physical and gutsy, and who could also be a leader.
I'm sitting in the middle of it.
But they came up with like millions of names, and I said, no, it's not it. And I thought, no, it has to be Helen Hunt.
Are you gonna go for it, Joe?
I liked Helen. She has a feeling of a real Midwesterner in many ways, in her speech and in her manner. It was a fun kind of dance to play with her because we were lovers who had fallen out. There was an unrequited love that was still there. We had to play out this dance. But she was up for it. She was cool. She's got a little tomboy in her, and I liked her. I thought we had some chemistry together.
I need therapy?
I didn't say that.
I need a therapist? What could I possibly need a therapist for?
I don't know.
You're the doctor, tell me.
The key thing is that I had to establish a little bit who those people are, you know, because it's really hard in the movie to follow a bunch of characters if you have no idea what they stand for. So I had to create early on in the movie a little scene for every character a little bit. I have to introduce him.
Hello, nice to meet you.
I think they are thrill seekers, but they're scientists, and they're trying to learn as much as they can in the hopes of saving lives. That's kind of the nature of the plot line of Twister.
NSSL predicting an F5.
You go, stop it.
And we had a great cast on Twister, so we were constantly trying to come up with little ways to be emotionally attached to these characters.
I gave them some, like specific things that had to be in there.
Can I get way down there? Because I got the whole team behind me.
No. The team is not behind. You guys are way ahead of everybody.
Way ahead of everybody.
You're all by yourself.
And other things that came more out of the personality, because they could help me by making them unique. I have to start a movie that shows the audience right from the beginning that what you're going to see is really impactful and what it can do to real human beings. And in this story, what happened in the beginning of the movie is basically something that happened in Helen Hunt's character in reality when she was a child. What I wanted to suggest is, and show to the audience, that the power of those tornadoes is so gigantic that it really can completely suck you out of there. And I didn't want to show the tornado, so you just get a little glimpse.
When we did the original version of the movie, her father did not die, and Steven Spielberg, when he viewed the film, said, you know what, I think the best thing to do is her father has to die. He had to get swept up in the tornado. So when he was in the cellar, and he's protecting his family from the tornado, he's holding down the cellar door, and what we did was we had him tied to the cellar door. And as the door is flapping, of course, the special effects guys are on the outside making the door flap. And then on the cube, we had it all rigged on cables and counterweights, and we just pulled the door right off. But he was attached to the door, so he just went right with it, and he's gone. And we start our movie.
When I started researching the role, I had read incredible stories of outbreaks of tornadoes. See, when I first got the job, I had to go and understand what a mesocyclone was. I tried to just steep myself full of this stuff. When you'd read the script, it was like, your line, your line, run, almost get killed. Your line, my line, run, almost get killed again. Just from reading the script, it was exhausting to think how much running, how much dodging, how much ducking. I loved it. I drove myself to location every day. I just remember the air and the sound of the meadowlarks and all of this stuff, and I couldn't have been happier making the film. Now, Jan is a very physical guy. He's pushing himself as hard as he'll push his crew and his actors. But I admired that.
Cue her a little later.
And I find that's exciting to me. It's a very tough thing making a movie like this. You have got to be up for the challenge. It's going to test your physical endurance, it's going to test your patience, it's going to test everything. You're fighting the schedule, the weather.
When we started, which was the Twister season, we had such bad weather. We had 4 bulldozers and tractors only because every car got stuck in the mud. We had so many vehicles just to pull trucks, trailers, camera equipment out of mud, and it was horrific. This was the middle of Twister season. But sometimes were days we could shoot like maybe 1 or 2 shots.
They got the entire crew together, and they had the tornado people, and they did like the safety seminar. It was like a 3-hour deal, and we took it serious. And you'd be shooting, all of a sudden you'd get a tornado warning, and if it was within 5 miles of us, you got to bring down all the cranes and all the lights, and you got to stop.
As the movie progressed, it became really sunny. And sometimes, in one location it's sunny, and the other one is cloudy, and the other one it's completely gray, and you all have to make it look the same.
Jan wanted to push it as far as he could to really make the audience really believe that it was the actors doing all of their own stunts.
One of my responsibilities as a visual effects supervisor is always to work very closely with a special effects supervisor, and that's a person who does all the practical stuff on set. And John Fraser was just a great guy.
He builds great stuff, and he just has these wild ideas. And the wind machine that they had was a 707 jet motor mounted on a 40-foot truck with another 40-foot container above it to push debris into it.
I went out into the desert out in Mojave where they have the airplane graveyard out there. We said, okay, we're looking for a jet motor. And I said, turn that one on. I said, nah, Jan's not gonna like that. I said, how about that big one over there? What size is that? They said, well, that's a Boeing 707. That sounds good. I like the sound of that. They fueled it up, fired it up, and I said, okay, I'll take 2 of those. So they literally took them off the wings of the airplane, and then we took them back to our facility in Sun Valley and mounted them on trucks. And when you're doing a movie like Twister, debris is what it's all about.
Debris! We have debris!
And whenever it's close to somebody, we will make it out of rubber or lightweight. What we did was we just had people go out and we just brought in stuff from recycling plants. And then we had to clean it all. Anything that we had to be all sanitized.
We're off to see the wizard!
What we did was we just put a big box up on top of the jet motor, and then we just literally got inside the box and we'd shovel the debris outside the box, and then when it would fall into the exhaust and then just propel it. We did a lot of traveling range shots where we had 3 vehicles, and the lead vehicle was a 4,000-gallon water truck. Then we had the insert car that had the camera crew on it. And then we had the picture car, which was the big red truck. We hooked all of them together, and the water truck pulled everything.
So, if you start your hill when you're on top of the bridge, the first part, aim it sideways.
I remember when we started researching what we were going to use for hail. We went into plastic ice cubes and this and that, and finally we got a few blocks of ice, these 300-pound blocks of ice, and we took an ice crusher that we normally use for snow. We altered it a little bit, slowed it down, and what came out of it was these big chunks of ice. So we put milk in each block of ice. That was the color in it, so it was opaque. Then we set up the machine and we did a test.
Swami, how much ice we got left?
We saw the footage and it really looked cool.
There were things where I suggested, okay, you definitely try to do this practically. And Jan is certainly a very hardy special effects supervisor. I mean, he will just about try anything.
What is that?
One of the most important things in the movie is to keep the combination of physical effects and visual effects in scale so that one doesn't jump out from the other. So, for instance, when the tanker gets lifted up by the twister and pulled up in the air and then falls down, that's for real.
The big tanker truck we dropped from a crane. We made that whole tanker truck out of lightweight aluminum and lightweight rubber tires, and then we actually had it rigged so that it would swing into the pickup truck. And then from there, Stefan Fengmeyer at ILM took over.
When it comes out of the tornado and scrapes towards them, it was a CGI truck, because that kind of movement you just couldn't do with a full-size truck. But then later on, of course, once it's gotten over them, it turn around and drive back, and it falls out of the sky and explodes. That was a real, that was a real explosion. I think there were probably about 16 cameras on that.
There was over 1,000 gallons of gasoline in that tanker truck. Actually, we did that twice. We had another tanker truck. A week later, we came back and did it again. And, of course, we wanted to do it again because it was just fun to see,
But I thought one of the ultimate things has to be that it really picks up a house and rolls it down the street.
Oh my God.
I had seen some footage of it, and, obviously you cannot do that for real.
When it actually sort of tumbles across and then just sort of lands smack on the road, that is, of course, computer animated, because there's no rig that you could use, even a huge crane or whatever, without immediately destroying the house. So there was a practical house that actually was put on the street. The truck drives into it.
The front of the house was upright, but the back of the house was upside down. Well, the truck drives through the front door, but when it comes out the back, the house is upside down. So it looks like the house has done a 360 degrees revolution, when in reality, it never did anything.
We had built sections of the set where the car would go in high speed. So it was basically 6 or 7 different sets.
It all takes place over a span of 5 or 6 weeks in different locations. So it just takes a long time, and there's 20 different pieces in there.
I thought it was such a fun thing to do. We went from bedroom, living room, kitchen and came out on the other side. And on the road, and it's like, what the hell just happened to us? But it was extremely complex to do.
Careful, careful. This house could go any second.
In those days, when we were there, it's actually not even that long ago, a lot of people were moving towards the city. So we found a lot of tiny little towns where very few people lived. And I was looking for a space that could be used for that particular scene.
Man, the art department did a great job. I think it was Waukeeta was the name of the town. And there were a lot of empty buildings that they really wanted to get rid of, and they were trying to rebuild.
Basically what we used is the houses where nobody lived, we tore down and used them as set dressing, so it looked real.
The art department just did a fantastic, cars up in trees and houses destroyed.
The exterior of the house was in the town called Waukeeta. And then to have control over the interiors, it was built on the inside of a soundstage. It was actually a warehouse that we found in Norman, Oklahoma.
The more real it looked to me, the better the scene would work. And that, I think, made that scene so fantastic, is that, like I saw the other night on TV again, it was like another one of those Twister disasters. It gets completely flattened.
Them running and then these fence posts becoming sort of projectiles at spear. That was shot on location.
We spent 2 or 3 months making the mechanism that was under the ground that would make that fence do that as they were running by it. And we just pushed this whole thing with air, and it's just, as it's going by, wherever there was a hole, the air would go up the hole and push the piece of the picket fence out.
Put the projectiles in at the last minute.
And then run into the big barn. It's full of farm implements that would just, take your head off immediately.
Oh my God, who are these people?
So they run out of that again and finally run towards this little water pump shed. And in there, knowing that the tornado was coming, tied themselves to the iron pipes there.
There was a shot that Jan needed that we couldn't do on location, that we shot months later. And it required building this incredible, weird kind of Ferris wheel type of effect, gantry, that I guess John Fraser figured out.
When we were having our earlier meetings, there was a shot where the two characters get sucked up in the tornado. Ah! So they said, well, anybody, got any ideas how we're going to do that? So I said, we can go back 50 years and like Fred Astaire dancing on the walls. That sounded pretty archaic. Well, 6 months later, after we finished the movie, I get a call and I showed them what we'd do. We literally put the set inside a big ring and attached the camera to it, and then we had a big fan underneath it, and it rode with it. So as that ring went around and the camera went with it, they actually were just like hanging upside down, but camera-wise, it looked like they were going straight up into the eye of the tornado.
The actors would go all the way to the top, and then they really hang. So it looks like they're being pushed from the top, which I had wind machines all around, so that as they got higher, the wind would come from the right direction. And that worked fantastic.
Okay, having a look, let's stand by, please.
Really the big thing about Twister that people might not realize, the way it was photographed was really quite much more dynamic and sort of quite freer than visual effects before were really done. We really didn't do any blue screen for the movie at all. So all the things where we had to put the tornadoes behind the running people, it kind of comes down to digital paint work where you kind of rotoscope. It's very hard work, but I think it was absolutely necessary to make this film seem real, that you really were there.
The most difficult thing in those days is what people don't remember, is that originally when you make a movie with visual effects in those days, you put the camera on a tripod, you lock it off, and you make very little pans. Well, there's one thing we're going to have to change. This camera will never be on a tripod because, you cannot get a sense of danger and action and incredible quick changes if I cannot put this camera on my shoulder. We made a lot of tests while we were shooting and see if we could do it. One other thing that I really enjoyed later on in post was actually when we had to come down to what those twisters are going to look like, is helping to design the look of the twisters.
Now the thing we did certainly for research was to gather all the footage we could. The biggest problem was that, of course, it's very difficult to find any film footage because they are so unpredictable. Jan watched a lot of that obviously as well too, to really duplicate that experience of how chaotic it is and all the different elements in it. And so our approach was to sort of look at that and then say, okay, now how would that look on film?
How does it fit in the landscape and where does it connect? Because if you don't have it connect, if you don't see this interaction between where it hits the ground and the ground itself, then it's not going to work. Then it becomes just like an object that's just put in there, and that was difficult.
They had sort of a storm unit that actually started filming, I think, a month before, and drove down all the panhandle there from Oklahoma to Texas and to just get some footage of huge storm fronts, and we were able to use some of those. Where other sequences, for instance, Hailstorm Hill, where they're driving up the hill and then the hail starts happening, they try to get the Dorothy off the truck. That whole swirling sky and that was all computer generated because there was literally nothing up there but blue sky or gray sky at least, you know. And so sometimes we had to create it all and sometimes we were able to use something that was there as a sort of a starter kit.
We do not have a visual. Help us out here.
We did have a lot of reference and there were a lot of different looks. And they always do look different. It always depends also what they're going through, what kind of color earth they're picking up. And you know, how much water content is there and how much of a speed do they travel and the wind speed inside of them. So you try to use all of those, and then it's really, you know, working with somebody like Jan also to articulate that. That one in the end was probably like a wall of elephants coming through.
Run!
Well, some of the other ones were much more elegant in a way. I thought the water funnels were sort of like, you know, you could sort of say like water fairies dancing out there in their own little mysterious dance. Now animating them really, it's actually a fairly simple task in terms of their movement because you're just really animating a little string around which you build the tornado. So in that terms of animation it was easy, but then creating the tornado around it was the hard part. Instead of having a solid surface, you're really using a completely different approach to represent mass. I mean, the mass of a tornado, which is literally billions and billions and billions of particles. None of this existed when we started, and Twister was certainly the technology created for it, a tremendous foray for Industrial Light and Magic into using particle systems to that extent.
What are you doing?
What I really wanted to make sure is that the threat was growing. You know, during the course of the movie, the audience understands what it really means, a tornado. And you start with a small one. So you're taught a little bit what a small one can do. So you set up a little bit then what a bigger one could do.
Whoa!
I really wanted to create characters because they are talking to the Twister.
Come on, take her!
They see it as a character themselves. It's something they battle. So they take it personal.
You've never seen it miss this house and miss that house and come after you.
So it was for me very important to create a character for every different Twister.
Okay, we got sisters.
You read a lot of different accounts of what happens in tornadoes, and I think there was really one where a farmer had said that he had missed some of his cattle and then it was found literally 20 miles away. So it was sort of reconstructed that the tornado had actually picked them up but also put them back down in a relatively gentle fashion because they were still alive. And that's where the cow came from.
I remember doing the flying cow sequence, and Jan was trying to coordinate so that me and Helen and Jamie, our eye line is going the same length.
The key thing is how do the actors relate to something they don't see, because that's the one thing they could not see in the set. I could not on the set create the actual Twister. So basically I kind of had to act it out, you know, and I was running around where the Twister was and with bullhorns and so that the actors had something to react to.
He goes, Bill, no, you're not watching here. The cow is flying. Here it comes. Follow the hand, follow the fingers. It comes around. Now it's coming around again. Now your line. Here comes the cow flying by again. It's so funny because that is such a popular moment in the movie, especially with young kids and stuff. They love the flying cow. I told Jan my version would be, in the Gothic version, the cow would fly by once, and then you wouldn't see the cow again. Then about 15 seconds, it would just rain hamburger meat down on the car as the barometric pressure just exploded the cow.
As a visual effects person, you really never hear the sound.
It's moving fast! Coming towards you, Joe!
Since that is going on in parallel, most of the time you don't really know it. And so I was very happy to hear then later on, that was such a successful combination. Although I was certain that would happen.
I think it's really important that your antagonist has a personality. And basically we have 6 of those. So, and that personality had to change. So I really felt very strongly about creating different sound effects for each one. And we started recording lots of different sounds and made a gigantic library of sound effects. But we also started recording lions, all kinds of animal screams, breaking boards, big, like crashing cars into walls. And ultimately, all those things mixed and slowed down and mixed together, we started creating different effects. I wanted the tornado to talk to them. I wanted to get a sense like it's a living thing. But it was a really great effect because really the theater was shaking. It's still really good. I think it's still one of the best sound effect movies in a long time. I think even now it still holds up very, very well sound effect wise.
Where'd it go? Where is it?
One of the great themes is man versus nature. It will always hold our fascination. There's a fear, there's also a sense of wonderment. The forces of nature are humbling to behold and terrifying. There's a fear of tornadoes like there is of sharks. It's a primordial thing. It's almost in our genetic code. People are fascinated. It's kind of like one of those things where you're afraid, but you're almost so compelled by the awesome nature of seeing a tornado that you might become almost mesmerized by it to the point where you forget you're in mortal danger.
Get underground! Take her right now! Go!
Having such a great cast and crew is the best memories of the making of the movie. They all were like a team because everybody had the same struggle. Nobody had anything more than the other person. We all were the same, it's like we're spread over like God knows 30 little hotels, and we still all have dinner together. It was the best time, and crew-wise and cast-wise, one of the best movies I worked on.